When did you realize standing up for yourself meant betraying your family? The smell of antiseptic and stale coffee still clings to my memory, a lingering scent of the precise moment I realized there are lines you simply cannot uncross, even for family. It was less a decision, more a slow, sickening understanding that bubbled up from my gut, telling me I was about to become the villain in someone's story, or perhaps, finally, the hero in my own. Thought felt selfish, considering the circumstances, but the alternative felt like a betrayal of every principle I held, and every ounce of self-respect I'd fought so hard to cultivate after years of being everyone's convenient doormat. It had all started innocently enough, as these things always do. My phone buzzed with an urgent family group chat message from my mom, the kind that makes your stomach clench before you even read it. Grandma Laura's fallen, hospital, just those 3 words. Grandmother Laura Khan, 75F, had always been a force of nature, a woman who treated every interaction like a transaction where she was always the customer, and everyone else was desperately trying to earn a 5-star review. My mother, bless her heart, had tried for decades to meet this impossible standard. I am Laura Cox, 34F, by the way, the reluctant mediator, or as my younger brother once affectionately put it, the family's designated emotional punching bag. I run a small online art gallery, a passion project that barely pays the bills but gives me the flexibility to respond to family emergencies, which lately felt like a full-time job. Within an hour of the text, I was on the road, navigating the familiar labyrinth of suburban sprawl to get to the hospital. The traffic was, of course, horrendous, a seemingly intentional obstacle course designed by the universe to delay my arrival at the epicenter of familial chaos. My mind raced, trying to anticipate the various permutations of drama. Grandma Laura wasn't just frail, she was dramatic. Her ailments were always grand, her demands non-negotiable. This fall apparently had broken her hip, a serious injury for anyone, let alone a woman her age. When I finally pushed through the swinging doors of the emergency department, the waiting room was a scene straight out of a low-budget indie film about existential dread. Fluorescent lights hummed, casting a sickly yellow glow on tired faces. My mother Sarah was already there, wringing her hands, her face etched with worry. My dad, quiet as ever, sat beside her, offering silent support. "Laura, thank God you're here," Mom whispered, pulling me into a tight hug. She smelled faintly of stress and hand sanitizer. "She's still in assessment. They're saying it's definitely a hip fracture. She's in a lot of pain." I nodded, my gaze sweeping the room. No other family yet. My aunt and uncle lived a few hours away. Cousins were scattered. It was always us, the core 3, who bore the brunt of Grandma Laura's particular brand of high-maintenance affection. The next few hours blurred into a tedious cycle of waiting, hushed conversations, and the occasional harried nurse delivering vague updates. Finally, a doctor, a young man with exhausted eyes, called us into a small consultation room. He explained the surgery, the recovery, the need for rehabilitation. Words floated around me, pinning non-weight-bearing extensive physical therapy, long-term care options. That last phrase, long-term care options, hung in the air like a storm cloud. My mother visibly stiffened. We all knew what it meant. Grandma Laura lived alone, fiercely independent, despite her constant need for assistance with everything from grocery shopping to fixing a jammed printer. The idea of her in a nursing home was, to her, a fate worse than death. She had made that abundantly clear on countless occasions, usually during holiday dinners, punctuated by dramatic sighs and looks of utter despair. It was during this conversation that my cousin, Walter Petrov, 42M, arrived. Walter was a veteran, medically discharged years ago after something vague. He never talked about it. He used to be the life of every party, quick with a joke, always ready for an adventure. Now he carried himself with a heavy weariness, a jadedness that seemed to permeate his every word and gesture. His eyes, once sparkling with mischief, now held a haunted, distant look. He walked in, gave a curt nod to my parents, and then his gaze settled on me. "Heard the news," Walter said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. He pulled up a plastic chair and slumped into it, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. "How bad is it?" we explained. Walter listened, his expression unchanging. When we finished, he just sighed, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. So, the usual drama, just with higher stakes. His cynicism was palpable, a defensive armor he'd worn for years. It sometimes felt like he was constantly bracing himself for the worst, and usually with Grandma Laura, his expectations were met. The doctor left, promising to update us after the surgery. The discussion immediately pivoted to what would happen next. "You can't go back to her house alone," my mother stated, echoing the obvious. "Not for months, maybe ever. And a nursing home, you know how she feels." My dad cleared his throat. "We can't have her. Our place isn't set up for that, not with her mobility issues. And your mother, Sarah, she needs her rest, not a full-time patient." My mom nodded, her face crumbling slightly. She loved her mother, but she was exhausted by her. Years of managing Grandma Laura's emergencies had taken their toll. That's when all eyes turned to me. I could feel the silent expectation. My apartment, while not huge, was on the ground floor. It had a spare bedroom, and I worked from home. The unspoken question hung in the air. "Laura, you're the logical choice, aren't you?" My heart sank. My small, quiet sanctuary, about to be invaded by a demanding 75-year-old with a broken hip and an insatiable need for attention. It was a terrifying prospect. My career, which was already fragile, would undoubtedly suffer. My mental health, which I meticulously nurtured through quiet evenings and uninterrupted work, would likely take a nosedive. I don't know if I can," I stammered, feeling a flush creep up my neck. "My place isn't accessible. The bathroom's tiny, and my work schedule, it's not really set up for constant care." Walter let out a snort. "Not like mine is, right?" "No, I'm good. My job is being unemployed. Plenty of free time to wipe butts and fetch water. Just what I signed up for after all those years." His sarcasm was biting, his gaze distant, as if already reliving some past trauma. He had been living off his disability pension and occasional odd jobs for years, a point of contention for some family members who thought he should get his life together. But I knew better. The man was fighting a silent battle every single day. Walter, that's not fair, my mom started, but he cut her off with a dismissive wave. Fair? What's fair about any of this? She's an adult. She made her choices. Now she deals with the consequences. He looked directly at me. Don't let them push you into something you can't handle, Laura. Y'all regret it. His words, despite their jaded delivery, felt like a genuine warning, almost a plea. This was Walter's way. He'd seen too much, felt too much, and now he wore his cynicism like a shield. But underneath it, I knew there was a deep well of frustration, and perhaps a hidden concern for those he cared about, even if he expressed it in the most abrasive way possible. His past military experiences, though never explicitly discussed, clearly shaped his view of duty, consequence, and self-preservation. He'd learned the hard way about sacrifice, and it had left him bitter. The conversation devolved into a familiar pattern. My mom's worried pronouncements, my dad's quiet realism, Walter's sardonic commentary, and my increasingly frantic internal monologue. The solution, everyone seemed to silently agree, was me, and the pressure was immense. The surgery went as well as could be expected. Grandma Laura was groggy but alert enough to immediately launch into a tirade about the hospital food and the quality of her pain medication. He demanded to know when she was going home. My mom, trying to be gentle, explained the situation. Y'all need rehab, Mom, and then we're trying to figure out where y'all go after that. Grandma Laura's eyes narrowed. I'm going home. My home, you think I'm going to some old people's prison? Her voice, though weak, still carried that familiar cutting edge. Laura, she said, turning her head slightly to fix her gaze on me. You work from home, don't you? You have that spare room. It's perfect. My stomach churned. This was it, the direct assault. I took a deep breath, trying to channel some of Walter's bluntness without his bitterness. Grandma, my apartment isn't equipped for someone needing that much care. There are stairs to my building's entrance and the bathroom is tiny. It's not safe for you or practical for me to manage all your needs. I tried to keep my voice even, but I could feel my hands trembling. Grandma Laura waved a dismissive hand. Nonsense. Y'all manage. You always do. And the stairs? What are family for, if not to help an old woman? Well, just get one of those ramps. And the bathroom? Well, make it work. Her tone implied that my objections were mere inconveniences, easily overcome by my inherent familial obligation. This was her customer persona in full effect, expecting me to bend over backward to provide service. She wasn't just demanding, she was utterly convinced of her right to demand. My mother, caught in the middle, started to chime in with some placating words, but Walter, who had been leaning against the doorframe, suddenly pushed himself upright. Look, Grandma, he said, his voice slow and deliberate, Laura has her own life. She's not your nursemaid, and her apartment is small. It's not going to work. You need professional care, at least for a while. Grandma Laura scoffed. Professional care? I don't need strangers poking at me. I need family. That's what family does. I looked at Walter with a flash of anger, a silent accusation. Walter, for his part, just shrugged, but I saw the muscles tense in his jaw. It was clear he was holding back a lot more. The next few days were a blur of hospital visits, calls with social workers, and endless family discussions, each more fraught than the last. My parents were exhausted. Walter was increasingly withdrawn, offering only cynical remarks or outright refusing to engage. I was stuck, caught between Grandma Laura's unreasonable demands and the growing pressure from my parents. One afternoon, I visited Grandma Laura alone. She was clear-headed and, if possible, even more insistent. Laura, you're the only one who can help me, she pleaded, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper designed to tug at my heartstrings. I don't want to be abandoned. Your parents are too old, bless their hearts. Walter? Well, Walter's no good for anything these days, is he? A casual dismissal of Walter, knowing a little of what he carried, made my blood run cold. It was a small, cutting remark that showed how little she truly saw anyone beyond her own immediate needs. It also reinforced Walter's jaded view. She genuinely saw him as useless. Grandma, I said, trying again, it's not about abandonment. It's about what's practical and safe. I am not trained for the kind of physical therapy y'all need. But if you fall again at my place and I am not strong enough to help you. She looked at me, a flicker of something, maybe surprise, maybe annoyance crossing her face. Y'all learn, you're smart. Y'all pick it up. And besides, I am not that much trouble. The lie hung in the air, thick and undeniable. The social worker, a kind but firm woman named Andrea Nelson, 65F, became an unexpected ally. Andrea had seen it all, years of families grappling with elder care. She quietly pulled me aside one day, away from the hovering presence of my parents and the dark cloud of Walter's cynicism. Laura, Andrea began, her voice soft but direct, your grandmother needs a high level of care right now. Even after the rehab facility, she'll likely require professional assistance for a significant period. Home care or a short-term skilled nursing facility. She paused, giving me a knowing look. It's very common for family members to feel this immense pressure, but you have to assess what you're truly capable of providing, not just what's being asked of you, especially if it compromises your own well-being or livelihood. I felt a surge of gratitude for her bluntness. It was like a lifeline, permission to put myself first, even a little bit. She's convinced she's coming to my apartment, I confessed, the words tasting like ash. Andrea nodded, her expression compassionate. That's not uncommon either. But ultimately, the decision is yours. You have the right to set boundaries, even with family. It's not abandonment, it's self-preservation. And it's ensuring she gets the asterisk right kind of care, which might not be what she asterisk wants asterisk right now. Her words resonated deeply. Self-preservation. The idea felt both liberating and terrifying. My entire adult life, I had been the one who fixed things, who smoothed over ruffled feathers, who put others' needs before my own. Setting a firm boundary with Grandma Laura, who had perfected the art of guilt tripping, felt like trying to stop a freight train with a feather. Later that day, back in the small, stuffy hospital waiting room, a new complication arose. My aunt and uncle, usually distant, called. They were concerned. Concerned, it turned out, primarily about Grandma Laura's house. It was a valuable piece of real estate in a desirable neighborhood, and Grandma Laura had always been cagey about her finances. We just want to make sure everything's in order, my aunt had said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Who's going to manage her affairs if she can't go home? Maybe it's time for her to think about selling the house. Get her into a nice assisted living place, one that's close to us. The subtext was clear. They wanted control, and perhaps a slice of the pie. Relocation pressure was suddenly not just about where Grandma Laura would live, but about a much larger, more insidious family dynamic. It wasn't just my apartment at stake, but Grandma Laura's entire future and potentially her assets. This was no longer just about a medical crisis. It was about power, control, and money. And I, the reluctant mediator, found myself squarely in the middle of a brewing storm. The ethical dilemma deepened. Was I defending Grandma Laura's autonomy, or enabling her unrealistic demands? Was I protecting her from avaricious relatives, or just delaying the inevitable hard choices? The air in the hospital felt thicker, heavier, laden with unspoken resentments and simmering greed. The weight of it pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that things were about to get a lot more complicated. But I still had no idea how I was going to tell Grandma Laura and the rest of my family that my apartment was definitively, absolutely off limits. The thought felt like a physical blow, and yet Andreas' words echoed in my head, "You have the right to set boundaries." I just hadn't figured out how to actually do it yet. The weight of it pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that things were about to get a lot more complicated, and I still had no idea how I was going to tell Grandma Laura and the rest of my family that my apartment was definitively, absolutely off limits. The thought felt like a physical blow, and yet Andreas' words echoed in my head, "You have the right to set boundaries." I just hadn't figured out how to actually do it yet. The next morning, the hospital felt even more oppressive. News about the house had spread like wildfire through the family grapevine, adding a new, bitter layer to the already toxic mix. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from my aunt and uncle, thinly veiled inquiries about Grandma Laura's prognosis, and increasingly direct suggestions about estate planning. It was nauseating. My parents, bless them, seemed oblivious to the underlying avarice, focused solely on their mother's recovery and the immediate problem of her discharge. They still looked at me with that hopeful, desperate gleam in their eyes. I decided I couldn't face Grandma Laura just yet. Not without a plan, not without shoring up my own resolve. Instead, I found myself seeking out Andrea. She was at the nurse's station, calmly discussing a discharge plan with a harried-looking nurse. When she saw me, she offered a small, understanding smile. "Everything all right, Laura?" she asked, her voice quiet as she led me to an empty consultation room. "Not exactly," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. "My aunt and uncle are circling. It's not just about her care anymore, it's about her house, her assets. They're pushing for her to sell and move into assisted living near them. It feels predatory." Andrea nodded slowly. "That's unfortunately also very common. Elderly parents often become objects of contention, especially when there's significant property involved. It adds another layer of difficulty to an already challenging situation." I leaned forward, her expression serious. "But it also might give you an opening. Your grandmother's immediate need is safety and professional care. If your aunt and uncle are pushing for assisted living, perhaps that's a path you can all agree on for different reasons. But Grandma Laura refuses anything like that," I countered, picturing my grandmother's indignant face. "She sees it as a prison, and she still expects to come to my apartment." "You must be clear," Andrea said, her gaze unwavering, unambiguously clear, and firm. "It's not a negotiation. It's a statement of what you can and cannot do. Frame it around her safety and proper care, not just your convenience. Explain that you cannot provide the level of medical attention and physical support she requires. Your apartment is not a medical facility, and you are not a trained caregiver. This isn't a rejection of her, but an acceptance of reality." Her words were a balm and a challenge, unambiguously clear, not a negotiation. It sounded so simple, yet felt monumental. I took a deep breath. "And Walter, he's so jaded. He just dismisses everything. He said something yesterday about her making her choices and dealing with the consequences. It was harsh, but it also felt like he was telling me not to get sucked in." Andreas' expression softened slightly. "Walter has his own battles, I imagine. Sometimes people who have experienced significant trauma or disappointment tend to project their own learned lessons onto others, often in a protective, albeit blunt, way. He probably sees you as a younger version of himself, perhaps, one who needs to learn to protect herself. Or perhaps he's had his own experiences with caregiving that left him burnt out. Have you ever tried talking to him about it? Really talking?" I shook my head. "He never talks about his time in the service. It's a closed book, and he's so cynical it's hard to get past." "Cynicism can be a shield," Andrea observed. "Sometimes a very thick one, but every shield has a weak point. He might be an unexpected ally if you can find a way to connect. He seems to understand the concept of self-preservation, which is what you're trying to embody now." That conversation with Andrea gave me a quiet strength. Realized I'd been so focused on managing my grandmother's demands and my family's expectations that I hadn't actually considered my own agency. I had to become the hero of my own story, as the initial thought had suggested. I found Walter in the hospital cafeteria, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, staring blankly out the window. He looked even more weary than usual. I slid into the seat opposite him. "Hey Walter," I began, my voice softer than it intended. "Can I ask you something?" He grunted, not turning his head. "Shoot, why do you think Grandma Laura is so insistent on coming to my place, or rather not going to a facility?" He finally looked at me, his eyes tired but sharp. "Control. It's always been about control with her. An image an assisted living place makes her seem old, weak, dependent. At your place, she'd still be the queen, the matriarch being cared for by her loving granddaughter. Plus, she knows you're a soft touch." His bluntness, usually annoying, was oddly refreshing. A soft touch, I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. Yeah, Laura, you always clean up everyone's messes. You're the family punching bag, remember? My words, I think. He even managed a faint, cynical smirk. She knows she can wear you down. She always has. You're right, I admitted, a lump forming in my throat. I always have. But I can't this time, Walter. It will break me. My art gallery, my peace of mind, my everything. Andrea, the social worker, she said I have to set boundaries. Be firm. He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something that wasn't cynicism crossing his face. Good for you. Took you long enough. He took a slow sip of his coffee. So what's your plan? I don't know, just tell her no. And my parents. Tell them it's not an option. Tell them it's for her safety and for mine, Walter's side. It won't be easy. She'll guilt trip you into oblivion. And your mom will probably cry, but you gotta do it. Remember what I said about consequences? Sometimes you gotta let people face them. Even family. He paused, then his voice dropped, becoming unexpectedly serious. You know, I learned that the hard way. Thought I had to save everyone. Took me years to realize you can't. And sometimes trying to just destroys you in the process. He looked out the window again, his gaze distant. I saw too much of that. People breaking themselves for others who didn't appreciate it or who just couldn't be saved. Leaves a mark. His words, raw and unadorned, were the closest he'd ever come to talking about his past. I suddenly saw him not just as jaded, but as a wounded man who genuinely wanted to protect me from the same mistakes he felt he'd made. A reluctant, broken ally. Thanks, Walter, I said, and for the first time I meant it without reservation. Don't thank me yet, he grumbled, but a corner of his mouth twitched upwards just barely. You still gotta actually do it. Weeks later, the hospital room felt like a battlefield. Grandma Laura had been moved to a rehabilitation facility, but her discharge from there was looming, and the question of her long-term placement was still unresolved. My aunt and uncle had escalated their concerns to thinly veiled threats, suggesting they would pursue legal action if Grandma Laura's assets weren't properly managed. My parents were frantic, caught between their mother's emotional demands and the pressure from her other children. It was time. I had rehearsed it 100 times in my head. I chose a moment when my parents, Walter and Andrea, were all present during a family meeting with the rehab's social worker. Grandma Laura, still frail but with her usual steel in her eyes, sat in her wheelchair, a blanket draped over her legs. Grandma, I began, my voice trembling slightly despite my resolve, we need to talk about where y'all go after rehab. My apartment is not an option. Her head snapped up. What? Laura, we discussed this. It's perfect. You work from home. Her voice, though weak, still carried the old imperious ring. No, Grandma, it's not perfect, I said, forcing myself to meet her gaze. It's not safe for you. There are stairs to the building entrance. Bathroom is too small to maneuver a walker, let alone a wheelchair, and I'm not trained to provide the level of medical care, physical therapy, or personal assistance you need right now. If you fell or needed help, I wouldn't be able to give it to you safely. My mother gasped, but I pressed on, remembering Andreas' words, not a negotiation. This isn't about abandoning you. It's about making sure you get the care you need to truly recover and stay safe. Professional care. This is ridiculous. Grandma Laura exclaimed, her face flushing with anger. You're my granddaughter. Family helps family. What happened to you, Laura? You used to be so understanding. She turned to my parents, her voice rising. Sarah, John, tell her she has to take me in. My mother wrung her hands. Laura, dear, your grandmother is right. She needs us. And your apartment. No, I cut her off gently but firmly, my gaze locking with my mother's. Mom, Dad, you know our house isn't equipped. I know you're exhausted. My apartment isn't equipped either. This isn't a personal slight. This is a practical safety decision. For Grandma's well-being and for mine, I cannot become her full-time caregiver. I am not qualified and it would destroy my business and my health. My mother's face crumbled, but my father for once stepped in. Sarah, Laura's right. We all know how difficult Mom can be and how much she needs. It's too much for any of us at home. She needs trained help. Grandma Laura let out a frustrated sound, her eyes darting to Walter, as if expecting him to back her up. But Walter, leaning against the wall, just watched me, a faint, almost imperceptible nod of approval on his face. He said nothing, but his silence was a powerful endorsement. Andrea Nelson, observing quietly until now, spoke up. Mrs. Khan, Laura is articulating a very valid concern. Her home is not suitable for your current needs, and she's not trained to provide medical-level care. Her prioritizing your safety and appropriate care is actually a sign of her love, not a rejection. We've looked into several options for skilled nursing facilities and assisted living that offer the support you need during this crucial recovery period. She then quietly presented brochures she had prepared. Grandma Laura looked from me to Andrea, then to Walter's impassive face. I saw no crack in my resolve, no support from Walter. Her usual guilt-tripping tactics were failing. She slumped back in her chair, defeated, but a glimmer of her old fight remained. Fine, if none of you care about me, then put me in one of your prisons. I suppose that's what happens when you get old. It was far from an enthusiastic acceptance, but it was a step. The first crack in her unreasonable facade. The relocation pressure from my aunt and uncle, however, was about to escalate. A month had passed since that fraught family meeting. Grandma Laura was settling, grudgingly, into a highly rated skilled nursing facility chosen by Andrea and my parents. It was a compromise, a short-term solution for rehabilitation that would transition to long-term assisted living if her mobility didn't improve enough for independent living. My aunt and uncle had been furious, accusing us of railroading their mother and trying to hide her assets, even attempted to get a lawyer involved. But Andrea, with her vast experience, had anticipated this and worked with my parents to ensure all documentation regarding Grandma Laura's care and finances was impeccably in order. She also subtly guided my parents in having Grandma Laura execute a durable power of attorney and a medical proxy, giving them, and specifically my dad, the authority to manage her affairs. This effectively cut off my aunt and uncle's attempts to seize control of her house. The house became the next battleground. My aunt and uncle argued it should be sold immediately to fund her care, or at least to preserve its value. Grandma Laura, surprisingly, had found a new, quiet obstinacy. It's my home, Shed stated, a day after begrudgingly accepting the skilled nursing facility. I want to go home when I'm better, and until then, nobody sells my house. My parents, exhausted by the whole ordeal, were inclined to agree with Grandma Laura, if only to avoid more conflict. This put me in a new quandary. Was it enabling her unrealistic hope or protecting her from predatory relatives? I found myself, oddly enough, turning to Walter for advice. He'd started visiting Grandma Laura at the facility, sometimes just sitting there, not saying much, but his presence seemed to subtly calm her. Cynicism, I realized, was not a dismissal of all humanity, but a learned skepticism about self-serving motives. One afternoon, I brought him coffee at the facility. We sat in the quiet common room, away from the other residents. "What do you think about the house, Walter?" I asked, indicating the latest angry text from my aunt. They're really pushing. He took a slow sip. "It's her house. She gets to decide. Unless she's declared incompetent, which she's not. Just has a broken hip and an attitude problem." He paused. "The old lady's right. She wants her home. Maybe she'll get back there, maybe she won't. But it's her choice to hold on to that hope, or that control, whatever you want to call it." He looked at me, a glimmer of that old mischief in his eyes. "Besides, do you really want Aunt Carol and Uncle Ted getting their grubby hands on it? They'd probably sell it for below market value just to get a quick buck, and then complain they didn't get enough." Laughed, surprised. "You actually think she might go home?" He shrugged. "Unlikely, but it's her dream. People hold on to dreams, even impossible ones. Gives them something to fight for. And right now, she's fighting for that house. If she wasn't fighting for that, she'd be fighting us even harder about the facility." It was an unexpected insight, a strategic understanding of Grandma Laura's psychology that I hadn't possessed. Walter saw the hidden motivations, the subtle power plays. His jadedness, it turned out, wasn't just a shield, but a finely honed lens for observing human behavior. And I realized then that his presence, his quiet understanding, had made me feel less alone in this. He wasn't just a cynical bystander. He was a silent protector, in his own way. He taught me, through his actions and his blunt advice, that setting boundaries wasn't about being selfish, but about being realistic, and that sometimes protecting yourself also allowed you to protect others, even if they didn't realize it. "You've been good to her, Walter," I said, genuinely. "Visiting her." He just grunted. "Someone has to keep her from driving the nurses completely insane. And she keeps asking me to fetch her coffee. Better than being bored at home." Looked down at his hands, then quietly added, "And it's a distraction. Better than other things." He didn't elaborate, but I understood. He was fighting his own demons, and this, in its own way, was a part of his healing process. Giving back, even in a small, grumpy way, was a step towards rebuilding himself. My perception of him had completely shifted. He wasn't just a bitter veteran. He was a complex man trying to find his way, and in helping me, he was helping himself. 3 months later, the dust began to settle. Grandma Laura was still in the assisted living section of the facility, her mobility not having improved enough for her to safely return home. But the relentless push from my aunt and uncle had subsided. My dad, empowered by the power of attorney and Walter's unexpected support, had firmly informed them that Grandma Laura's house was not for sale unless she explicitly decided so, and that her finances were being managed responsibly by him. He even hinted at seeking legal counsel himself if they continued their harassment. The threat from the usually quiet John Cox had apparently been enough. Grandma Laura, surprisingly, had started to adjust. The initial tirades had lessened, replaced by a grudging acceptance, and sometimes even moments of genuine gratitude. She still complained, of course, about the food, the bingo, the television shows, but her complaints felt less like demands and more like observations. He had even started to knit again, something she hadn't done in years, making surprisingly intricate scarves for the nurses she claimed were incompetent. One sunny afternoon, I visited her. She was sitting by a window, bathed in light, a half-finished scarf on her lap. She looked smaller, perhaps, but also calmer, less fraught. "Laura," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it in years. "Thank you," I blinked, surprised. "For what, Grandma?" She looked out the window. "For not letting me come to your place. I see now, it wouldn't have worked. I would have been a burden, and I wouldn't have gotten this. Therapy. They make me walk here, every day. It's infuriating, but my hip is getting stronger." She paused, then, with a hint of her old demanding self, added, "Though the food is still atrocious." I smiled. "I'm glad you're feeling stronger, Grandma." She turned to me, a rare, vulnerable look in her eyes. "And thank you for not letting those vultures get their hands on my house. Walter told me what they were up to. He's a good boy, that Walter, even if he grumbles a lot." I felt a surge of warmth. She saw it. She saw Walter's quiet support, his protective nature. She even acknowledged in her own way that my boundary had been the right decision. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a meaningful shift. She was starting to see beyond her own immediate desires, recognizing the intent and care behind our actions. The unreasonable customer was learning that sometimes the best service isn't what you demand, but what you truly need. My own role in the family had shifted too. I was no longer the reluctant mediator, the designated emotional punching bag. I was Laura, the one who had finally drawn a line, not just for myself, but effectively for everyone. I hadn't solved all the family's problems, and the underlying tensions with my aunt and uncle would likely remain. But I had managed the immediate crisis, protected my grandmother's interests, and most importantly, protected my own well-being. My small online art gallery was thriving. The quiet evenings I cherished were mine again, and when my phone buzzed, I no longer felt that immediate clench of dread. I had learned that boundaries, when set with clarity and firmness, were not acts of selfishness, but acts of necessary self-preservation that, surprisingly, could lead to a healthier dynamic for everyone involved. I was still Laura Cox, but I was no longer just the reluctant mediator. I was the one who, finally, had chosen to be the hero in her own story. It felt less selfish now, and more like integrity. The lingering smell of antiseptic and stale coffee was fading, replaced by the faint scent of possibility.